a nigga? Can you feel what it means to be constantly exhausted? Can you feel the negativity prescribed to you before you even enter the world? I am tired. Tired of the pessimism, tired of violence, tired of lies, tired of inability to feel myself and others feel me. Lefty, 19 niggas let me feel it. 30 niggas let me feel it. What it felt like the world be the top. You don't feel the weight being in position. My death niggas let me feel like me. My mom used to lie to me. She told me that I until I kill them with intelligence. They had to care that they had to start with her organs when I'm doing in the box. My mom lied to us. Nothing is what I was going to prevent from sustained destruction. Was continuing to position niggas that does anything about the world. Not just what the world's finally rational. The fact that niggas offer me and never will be because it's unthinkability. Like feeling that society. They tell me I'm more than my checks. They tell me life is some hot shit, some religious that I should desire. The longer that time is not life worth living. Rather questioning the value of this appearance. Or just celebrate or is this depression, black depression is the same for the outside for 500 years accounting, which is no way to say I'm tired of celebrating that every day of studying. I try to give me those problems and going to used to be after press new just fucking press this what happens when you start to clear theory underneath any attempt to explain the code like no one is ever going to feed it to be named for the after pressure. So black dads raise their divorce and offers tough love. They feel they have to in order to prepare us for errors for the world that hates to see that as a thug, a threat, a criminal, the role of bounce and doors raised by Carol. The side of sexual awareness, successful black males from K through generation black males. He learned his first tools that Adams. I think black men inherit the past legacy trauma from generation having muscular socialization. Black men teachers descendants the way white America will see them how to protect themselves, to trust to love them, unhealthy relationship, masculinity, touching. He's not in the world that looks at him like girl men, no capable matters, no phone for vulnerability, with the black men hierarchy, the fragile black men have a social for feeling disintegrating, the mentality young men, black young males are placing certain factors around societal section aspects, be tough on getting in terms of masculinity, wines and projects are hurting my community. This is going to be a stereotype names black male talking to stereotypes such as commonality, a part of emotion, depression of black men because we are forced to some major society, the society and culture that renders us duly visible atoms. 2. I remember first encounter toxic masculinity before I knew what it was, why it's affected, and the black community, one of my male cousins started to believe when he started to cry, he started to say, why you cry like that, his visible social slip, this moves like the games, like on the commonality and the conversation with black, from man to male, when it came to emotion, having a few that's feels okay, the black male community, no many young boys and men can relate to student health, or rather regular love, the kind of love that teaches black males, so black boys about their emotions, suppressing feeling the fundamental knowledge of black male community, young black boys are crying to solitude because they are afraid of what the ultimate thing that they saw to they too feel just the rest of us by death and Peter go way down in black men, we're building a barrier between different white America, black men have all the past masculinity versus just taking and product that can provide America's social political sexual institution has suppressed everyone except wealthy white men. These reality coupled with aspiration like black men, no stress with selling dominant culture, and this is explained to reproduce the violence then the black community, patriarchy, and toxic masculinity affects black community as a whole. Patriarchal dominance are often a result of the concept of link powerlessness and oppression. I don't think often masculinity has been the character of black people, not necessarily protect itself in the face of oppression. Yeah, it has effects on black people. Black men have been abetting the establishing sex in the black community by asserting the dominance of sacrificing feelings of weakness, feeling as though their lives are always in jeopardy. There's powerlessness, and this is not justifying sexual behavior. Black men have been defensive of all nations, like creating the motive behind killings of black men. And in this internalized masculinity in the black culture repressive trauma that black men experience, this shit is taking away. You're told on me, my brothers, my fathers, our mental and emotional well-being. We're taught to shut up, don't cry, don't express yourselves, man up, bottle up. Does anybody know how it feels to be a nigga? Yeah, do you even care? So trauma shit is destroying us. Adams. 4. These problems are deeply integrated in how we raise black men. These black males, problems masculinity, taking massive toll on mental health. You are feeling emotion 9. They're human acting for black men are totally repressive when they come from strong friendship around pulling masculinity, toxic masculinity, or can anger, frustration, gun, sadness, people place black males who are pulling their full ability to be fair that they are risking developing mental health problems. Don't cause understand beyond the repressed by within different notions and facts. Hard masculinity to make prove their million about society and for their religious relationship or lives include their own. They can be unlearned by teaching black boys. Emotional vulnerability, improving their mental health, emotional intelligence, knowing how to accept and understand. But empathy will come to experiences not be overly or trauma of any kind. Speaking about community does not make one in the black. If it does, in a way to confer development of the community. Black boys cry part 2 is off. It doesn't form the statement of democracy. Every breast out there to prioritize objectivity of absolute I don't fit any mythical as one. Instead, race, world, and friends, black is back here. Objective reporting lines of black social cultural peace and justice against. Most people parents heal nations, suspension to bring in wholeness. That victims will receive higher peace, money, healing, the economy will rebound and continue experience of freedom, media would offer protecting reporting with clarity, according to providence. And part 2 is black spirituality. I did a mama, dad, papa, my bros to find a communal tactic that affirms as negates black. That breeds hope rather than pessimism. That speak lightness in the darkness, something that can gently care for. This speaks to mental, emotional peace and be my niggas, black liberation theology. Come no wait. Not the racial jealousy collected on the black hour, who have found the source of inspiration of Bible God is simply connected to the community to serve against outline the purpose of ministry to eradicate poverty and bring real liberation to the breast black liberation reading does not advocate violence with sending and constructive. The whole point is to raise a question with the anything about this essentially with the white culture. This ain't just for niggas, it's about putting white power sex about embodying ourselves in positive ways about unity, peace, despite the differences we have about love and hope, despite the suffering reader. I mean, black kids suffer most in their love more than words can try ready. Putting black identity to family and was a way kind of grant people to turn black kids political same related modulation being black kids and not just those who are Africans in the relation of groups who suffer experience in term doctors identified on the alternate side of what is considered acceptable decision has to do with coalition politics though no we interact with how we can see we got in line suffering and oppression world war black or by white people walk the alternative for God the conspired liberation from walk from the oppression like African the last one here with their ass with the Bible code on different God with those who are also oppressed with those who are black is always in legal negative connotation God black or oppressed justice and release counted from their oppressed black all the all seeks to pro live together you knew what the human generation Holy Spirit and eradicate differences rather than those celebration like they all seek to look at how we live together across our differences in case outweighs the greater duration should be going on first tension and change the must but I don't think it's tried I don't want to build my downfall so how many more rounds you going to dismiss the concern make it a favorite state of black arguments ready too. A central part of the black theology has been a critique and logic of the whiteness, something to what you do all the white people severe reason also white theologians have dedicated foundation whiteness and the Jews is visible whiteness of the past of India playing will save our lives in the concept of the that we matter black theology is limitations to the world through ideas and understanding. This is some racism, European colonialism, Canadian globalization, globalization, and need for change of independence, pain, black theology, liberation, the community, social change for personal transformation, judging inequality for all women, liberation, the permanent development method for women, the right to relations to black liberation theology method. 15 groups of liberation theology moving from becoming womanist theology. Someone who loves the spirit representation has been defined as individually God has created textual black women's spaces. Human the category like black woman deal with the anciently woman's space. Womanist theology is personal space. And after 9 million, back in the foot, how we can show wine and very briefly. That's the incentive focus. 18 half of the situation you as a place to be doing me more voice. I'm trying to change the Holocaust Congress and we don't have to hill debate tournaments, have rooms with legislation balance, and active policies of our community, my world. Yeah, change the debate, change the debate, as well as most of them who told them influencing. No practice offer to the community, compared to nature, and the debate guarantees terms of coaches, or making the response to the trend, traditional engaging competition results in the environment, hostile to those working by race, gender, class, the gender, and sexual differences. Black hair, actually skip the words in King Cart. After the breach, ideology, ideology, combat oppression, the firm process, social degraded. Value, black liberation, ideology, explicitly states the person, person, from black theology, how we're going to meta Marxist on the black church, Marxist on the black theology, critique race, and non-basic power, revolution, and degrade Marxist and black theology, help both folks apply of the exploited, present, rated people, possible, affirm, empowerment. This prompts a serious dialogue. Rally a serious dialogue. Yeah. Yeah.
When black men need emotional support, who do they go to cry to?
I think that the argument is that black men don't have that kind of support to cry
so they
to.
don't have it in like non-black situations and non-black institutions. But when they do need emotional support, who supports them?
I guess speaking from a personal standpoint, I go to my room by myself.
Okay, I didn't ask about you though. I meant generally.
Well, the affirmative comes from a personal standpoint and how my experience can relate to the totality of black men in black communities.
Okay,
I think a lot of black men would agree to the fact that we cry in silence, we cry in like in the spaces of being alone.
So is the 1AC taking a stance that black men cry in a space of being alone, or are you just saying that's strictly your personal experience?
Well, I think it's both. That black men, more often than not, when they're crying somewhere alone.
Okay. What does the 1AC do when like a white person shoots up a black church or burns it down? Like, how is this portable outside debate?
Well, yeah, the 1AC is portable in a couple ways. One, obviously, we're not saying we're going to stop people from like committing acts of anti-black violence, but it allows a form of endurance and hope within that form of violence, i.e. they shoot up a black church, but black people still go to church because church is the one place where we can become a community with each other and feel hope despite the world.
Well, I guess the question is like, how is this app portable outside of the space? Not just how it's reflected outside of the world, just like how do you kind of take your movements that you're building in debate and take them outside of debate?
What's the difference in how it's portable and what it's reflected in outside?
I guess, never mind. I can ask a different question. What is my role in this debate as a black woman?
To provide a competing methodology of how we can engage in black care.
Okay. And how do black women generally, according to the 1AC, how should they engage in black care?
I don't know that that's necessarily up to me to define. I think that's just like defining negative offense for you.
Okay. In terms of like how the 1AC kind of resolves these issues of exhaustion and debate, what does the 1AC do?
Yeah, I guess once again, not going to take a stance of voting affirmative solves the totality of exhaustion. I think everyone would agree that no ballot does that. But the affirmative is key to center our ballots in kind of forms of black care, and it allows a form of black expression in which black people can be vulnerable and talk about the experiences and the inability to feel ourselves in the space of debate.
Okay. Could you explain what black liberation theory is according to the 1AC?
Yeah, black liberation theology is a form of praxis, both theoretical and material, of how black people can engage in a form of endurance to forms of violence and community organizing to resist oppression.
Okay. Is 3 off case will just be, yeah, the 1AC topic. Part 1, part 2, and part 3. Let me send it out. Okay, it's sent. Now my LC was funky. First off, interpretation when debating black debaters, rational statement in a democracy, free press, social parties, objective versus obfuscation, determine the division, affirmative, negative, ground, clarify, don't understand, mistake, you shouldn't go offers anything else, say definitions, free press, institute, media, Cambridge, no data, free press, newspaper, magazines, television, radio stations, and face opinions, and violation. They defend forward affirmative on the standards, 1 point perspective accuracy, they promote doing the actual raising pressure marks over the material conditions that are facing or rejecting academics to mean anything else. This is close political spaces. 2 white people create underrepresentation of people of color in policies, injecting black people within political institutions, counter the political prisoners is not just space for them. Means that white people are currently operating the political community can't represent black people anyways. Super sharper than not defending a method because black people and students in the activity are able to determine how exactly to utilize this kind of political engagement or social engagement in the future. And 2 is engagement on level as for engagement time and so that develop associated with quality engagement. And when you see can't wait, case reason arguments are false and some of the first engagement is key to resolving the way facts for discussion, conversation, last way to resolve the best model debate resistance includes movement that lasts for the method better get off the ground. There's not going to discuss allowing black people in the space for communal interactions. There are going to be used to explain the counter solutions all in the fermentation. We're going to vote next. You should vote next for clash. Your clash comes first and highest in the debate. Abdicating government actions takes down the interpretation for the debate. Sometimes retrieve from controversy first and active first. Categorized in the debate, which eliminates the pre-round benefit of pre-round research and engagement with respect to clash to linear attack. Engagement is necessary to finish debate from discussion station. It's a sliding tail. The T-base and after garners office remaining far right present advocates for black journalism. Any decide the T-base for the thing and workable clash and our interim, which will the academic engagement. Black education is great to see that great debaters and NTTC that 36 and 2016 proves that debate is responsible black bodies, special knowledge bodies, able to engage with such engagement, but I don't exist space accessible for black individuals. And the fair and fairness condition of debate because the debate is named their cost-objective evaluation. One is paradigm issues. Recently, illustrated generation where cognitive bias, racial critical and checkable gut fallacy, and because the drop debater in our reaction to defer future abuse because already said already happened and spend time reading through which should be awarded vision to very minimum and go back to because he is a violent social argument plus topical option other ground. He's not switching it on the absolute class figures so never about the community building rather he's willing to risk community fragmentation from the alternate impact so it's cycle. Counterattack so when you see interim prior dating boundaries condition over black women, what are they doing? They when you see black women in case in an impossible position to force communicate labor for survival, but simultaneously for conflict equilibration to get black and you forget where you came from. Harmon, the same labor slave comes to the views of gender differentiation, black labor's critical facts comes to combat, strike the black woman fuse work on the plantation, equals later to fight, abolition of maximize the labor's wares and rather than freedom or illusion conceived of relatively returning the way black labor's labor to the mirrors and black so we're exactly this mother when there's really strike as possible to make it turn of pack and slave and the black women are to rule their party from the White House first form the community labor violence and face except for the growing fight into the relationship of labor for more ordered revealed into labor and mixing the narrative of black insurrection refusal was not possible to mix with run to waiting and more survival and achievement which we intended to place over 3 minutes and no goal decided to have we find so much ability to little with 5 rules and fifth and 5 care which has been very much exploitation and forget the like analytics at the bottom of that. Third off, their invitation of celebration is a mode of survival. Infinite blackness relies on congregation of blackness based on multicultural violence because it turns blackness into a vehicle icon attachment owned by black people. Celebration represents a mistake with black lives by recreating icons of blackness and time in the black people. Don't redo blackness and practice the affirmation but also represent also practice of co-opting black and queer folk into undergraduate capacity to celebrate. That's student 19. My claim here is how racial functions of many people in the accent of explanation of belief where we can interpret was not fully black status quo and the aspiration to see the chance of light things of its icons and ability to should and some icons of benefits, text and vision speeches and fashion to support the that inspire the original perpetuity of civil society through medication of blackness and important century ideology. How at least icons of full black and all black people alike are classified as opportunity also to improve politics so people want to icons ourselves to be the full struggle outside of want to liberation of we have most cultural first of that temporary review of political politics especially confining the ontological the issue of blackness those black lives matter and icon having taken ways which fortify these multiples of being black people and the icon is actually the racial tensions with finders and actions and what must SNC for they can tell the difference between literate activists and mobs who prefer to burn and get lost will actually happen to the commercialization of the element to the movement into nation icon resistance to the narratives of race and rational practice of movement reducing everything to tail up your rules and actually a nature of American practice you can cut the card of American progress and if there is not displaying the little comic or two response to slavery rather than fungibility rules intense or sound outside for most population or population after the health of slavery exclusion or other fungibility because being understanding for ruler make African people just by the same prime or saving the cost would have been unlikely but the fact about American people working in economic was involved with the society comes to little cost to slave white people and from short that we can ever say to say the word if and so the response worldwide is already world and got to say no but there's little kinds of bodies and plus little kinds of cautious the value saving the body by bounds from also because brings refuse after slavery no affluent society goes levels for an unbound and the alternative is radical devastating back information saving black investigating negation except the most anti-blackness the means the world battle strategy also perceived world in 17 after policy possible for identity not organized or finding spikes information blackness was impossible without moving the bonds produced last machine reforce ideologies and blackness without remains about laws and attempts to recognition inclusion deciding bullish going through world selective with mediation and reconfigure on Boston chooses back control matter black go to case. On part 1 overview, vote deck on perception, the committee in debate, any less anti-black, and the explicit and states are able to resolve these issues of exhaustion in debate, which means that blackness will always get burned down, and it will still get burned down or get shot, but it means if they have an impact form, they do not have solvency. You cannot vote up until the scale of violence, impact, arguments back the scale of the solvency of the 1AC, insofar as interior unexplained back, how this kind of further resolve these issues of black exhaustion, or what specifically they changed about the basics to make black men less exhausted. You should not affirm it. It's a question of having to show up to debate another round, and on just less again, it's 1 point black men have the world on top of them, we continuously don't get emotionally support, which should link to his argument. The argument is about tough love, or resolved by the kind of living societies that take black men's feelings seriously. seriously. But in CX, they said that they go to the lunch room, but black men also routinely go to black women who do that later for them. Oftentimes, black mamas are the people who the community turns to during these times. I just responded by Gillespie argument. Responded by the Gillespie argument that we made that split that black women support and love black women. Shifting the entirety of the arguments coming here is about who's creating these issues. Anti-black is sustained by non-black people and institutions, not things like the critique and the counterpoint. On the basis of evidence, reading one card doesn't prove the fact that you are all of a sudden with black women. CX proves that black women, CX proves that interpretation is that black women cry alone, not that they turn to black women, should ignore the kind of labor that black women routinely do. The word here is also undermined. Black women also, you ignore the unique needs of black women, oftentimes including things like sexual assault. Go to part 2. Therefore, the queer care over their atrocity and focus on endurance while investing in communal forms to harness and displace effective energy destructive waste back 16. Pairing red can feel the production of order and degraded economy, finding sports and mopping out function where it says how to call it kinship and recode mass the capital's requirements for active labor and enterprise attachment to concrete foundations of healthcare versus development physical capacities to live within the streets of capitalism masquerade of self-autonomous labor will not create kinship and mandated sacrifice will need them to develop and enterprise labor forms to develop and calibrate and also accommodate towards whatever these rights collaboration to supplement the capital contain form the minority cause requires the intellectual laboring and design to go to part 3 on the code evidence. After pessimism towards this argument, pessimism imposes white structures, but functions and impact has the same anti-black liberal attachment that will inevitably happen between black and non people in debate. And first, your battle critique offense because your theory power lies on black women always being there to support black women. If you have a mutual relation negotiating with black women and black men, whereas the black theory just flips onto black women and hypermasculinity is also supported onto black women. You're forced to be strong in the face of all this. You should hold the line to how the 1AC defends uniquely how black women should engage in 1AC, not just one card that they read which is super under highlighted. You should read the evidence in the art. It just says that God creates and takes seriously black women. Sure, God can do that, but it's a question of do black women do black men and do the black community do that? Insofar as we believe that this happens to decrease in brain and gay.
What does consultation look like?
You ask black women if they should do the 1AC. If they agree that we should do the 1AC and we should do it in that method, then it happens. But if not, then they can change the method in ways in which they want to do it.
Is there like a bright line for who we ask, how many we
We just said black women. If a black person identifies as a woman, then they ask them.
Okay, wait. So who's to say I haven't done that?
I don't think the argument is if you specifically do that, but rather that the argument is that as a method, we should do this in the 1AC. Insofar as we consult them going forward, then we argue that insofar as we prove that the 1AC should be consulted with black women, and we should formulate a model in which black women are able to engage in the method, that is something that we say is good.
Yeah, but if the affirmative has consulted with black women, and
I don't think it's like one singular black woman, right? It's a method of like.
Well, that's what I just asked. Is there like a quantifiability or like?
I don't think we have to quantify it. I think again, it's just a question of a methods debate, and just you saying like we asked one black woman, I don't think kind of resolves the dissatisfying counter plan or the pig is articulating here.
Okay. I guess should I believe Afro-pessimism is true or submit myself to critique?
I'm confused by that question.
Like, should I submit myself to?
I don't think it's a question of like whether you should specifically do it. I think it's just a question of whether the critique is the best way to deal with anti-blackness.
Well, if it's the best way to deal with anti-blackness, should I submit?
Well, that means that like black people writ large, yes, we would argue that it is beneficial for them to agree with Afro-pessimism. And
I guess if black people are always pessimistic about their possibility of their life getting better, how is that good for
I don't think that's what Afro-pessimism says. Afro-pessimism doesn't say that like a black person's life individually can't get better. It just says that institutions, non-black institutions, can't get better. The argument is not that like black people can't go to other black people for support, right? Afro-pessimism just says that black people in relations to non-black people won't get the support there, which I'm sure the 1AC would probably agree with.
Okay, for sure. The topicality shell, if the case is so unfair, why'd you flip neg?
We flipped neg because we wanted to.
I guess if it was unfair, why would you constrain yourself to negating it unfair?
I mean, the debate space is unfair. Having unfair rounds is nothing.
So you're just gonna make it more unfair?
I don't see how the shell is making debate more unfair now.
No. But you negating against.
I negated because of my personal choice. It's not a question of like, I mean, we flipped and I asked you, yeah, but I decided to debate.
Could you explain the link?
On the critique?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the argument here is that the app kind of forces this idea of recognition within the society. For example, it cites Black Lives Matter as a good idea here, where they can kind of create icons surrounding the black movement and this idea of celebration. But instead of understanding that we're tying it to black people, it's rather a question of how the practice of kind of co-opting the work of black queer folks, specifically within the idea of religious institutions, will again happen here. So it falls into that same issue of whenever we attempt to kind of create a forefront of an ideology where we turn towards, for example, black theology. That just recreates the same libidinal attachment to black and non-black people, and then at the same time ignores black queer folk that's already done this work.
Okay, good. you explain facts 16?
Yeah. The argument on case.
Yeah.
Okay, so the facts evidence explains how like a deregulated free market doesn't just like, well, the issue of a deregulated free market here is that this idea of like attempting to find care within community kind of displaces our ability to then force like actual structures to do that same level of care. So we're kind of just like resubmitting ourselves to this idea of capitalism, where capitalism and the ways in which capitalism operates in terms of anti-blackness will never be able to care for black people, but the same ways in which that then kind of creates this like colorblind bureaucracy. We're enabled by the market where we kind of have these ideologies that community care will resolve anything, when in reality we also need to like inject ourselves in these spaces in order to kind of like change them structurally. Because obviously one community might be able to support each other, another community might not be able to do the same thing.
Alright, 155 left. Where is case the office in order? Anyone not ready?
Good.
Okay.
Extension lets me know black communities under pressure, prepare black people, so the white world, we lose the ability to feel three impacts when we, by the way, our to our communities, dividing three black people, our Western things also black kids try to object to reporting, keep for peace, and that's the black people leaders advocate, that's keep for black communal focus, and create unity, role about endorse black black, endorse black care, you method to create communities when it can be themselves, black liberation, is that methodology of intersection, spiritual affirmation, racial resistance, praise space, black kids oppose whiteness, the way I have approached space by my narrative, allows me to express and care for myself, performance, that way to trauma, impact, supportability, and upsetting, because we, by north has messed liberate individuals and communities, represents our arguments, not a question of songs, rather endurance, how can we endure from the end of the box of the ballot question, if I would frame it, this debate should be a question of methods of black kid rule about constitute what constitute when we sit like you can subject that two forms of black here, consider re-reclaim evidence of the ballot is key to challenge structural debate in the model, our practice justifies ourselves all for those arguments because it has to spill over to how debaters and norms develop in relationship to blackness and debate the facts, evidence, alternatives, is we never find care, so niggas cannot engage in surviving world alternative, also not force debaters, not forcing debate or structure to submit to care, but just for niggas to have it for themselves. Last decade, some of these capitalists niggas no way to endure in anti-capitalist society, though our arguments on black norm later, no Adam solves labor decide because it shows how this is how we can kind of destruct that kind of economy when black women are able to feel after kind of having to only rely on black women. Capitalism cannot solve the case because there's no reason why consultation can just solve every other instance of black women unable to acquire our arguments that doesn't say our arguments that we should be able to cry in external to having to rely on black women solve your arguments. The pessimism argument to pessimism turns violent because it trains blackness and negativity. When we're trying to touch stuff for negativity, you know, we're not relying on black women. Rather, we are for our personal expression. That's a performance. Our performativity argument that was conceived. Adam responds to the rest of their methodology arguments, so black women arguments. And we said you can engage in method of black here. T. Your model is networks for black versus black debate, A for liberation, relational debate for liberation, hierarchy, the relationship with niggas in the room, niggas fucking negative reading voting shit, impact turning terminal defense, the average truly unfair, you won't continue yourself to negating it. This great negation policy, black males, we always put on display to prove wrong, unfair, troops are depression impact, because the constitution is a violation, self-imposed, you prevent a method of methods, debate, competing strategy, collaboration, favor, antagonism, complete rejection of the affirmative consultation, black people can read affirmative, that implies black here about objectivity, check like your cycle of violence, because good education, carrying black because we can speak freely about our feelings that we for force, to follow tolerance, fairness, we have a talking big area around, I, me, our offices tied together, new press, depiction, historical content, concept, black suffering, not be affirmative of active social positions are topical as defined very well. So next is also said MTA reading T gets blocked for go back to affirmative topic exhaustion back in my politics later. It also said because no matter how topical I am, you gotta reproduce how you reproduce exhaustion. Because I never topical enough with turn limits because you want the same data on topic which puts out that less public next fragmentation said they attempt to define directives how we should feel or be negotiable with our communities because the whole text of masculinity antagonist any effective movement to gain the affirmative is the most effective form of movement also puts the clash and ineffective on one baby soft class so you can contest many parts of the affirmative second organization. This said movements and policies are good and possible when niggas are able to be vulnerable care for the such as mean that we can navigate your form of organizing if we can engage in the affirmative do not presume our arguments false prove that how black information is not viable when we're not legible enough though this has a space of human interactions that is their own argument proves that a counter trip solves are often abstraction center models future debate where often is only about objectivity which turns fair because not fair to prioritize objectivity when niggas are not able to get back to debate in the first place. Getting debate is never fair. Again, we get back to our models. Your models actually in the back of fragments communities. Counterpoint. Black council conflict against niggas are voting against creates a model where one group of black calls out the other for not council think was bad because they infinite regals. Like folks always pull out different groups that didn't consult B is a violent because the black people way between what groups the blacks is more important. Next to the binding the black people would say no to the affirmative campaign can also case so want to see the same this other campaign or any campaign would say yes they don't have to say yes having to they can also case it's irrelevant. They will say no one is enough but not say how much they will say that one is not enough but I would say how much is enough to resolve it. Leave this as answer one case permutation do both I consulted my mother and you want to read this affirmative organizations that people only do which is only consult to black women not to be genuine but just to meet the counterplay with that whenever something impacts the creek. You would see case of ways out because we try to risk history about how black people can engage in survival the world of the alternative reading pessimists against the efforts against reason of bad and following the reason job you introduce following years of following the country and theorization negativity. I am more than saying nothingness. Even if they're right, I protest your kind of theorization of negativity, black liberation, the alters of the impacts of loving equality, non-violence, and concepts that become normalized, actually prevent any ability to initiate violence, permutation, duty after as an instead of the alternative black liberation, salvation, the black breaks and disorient white, instead of permanent niggas great, better one exit permutation, like niggas who want to do the after, niggas who want to do all this is better, best way to stop communal fragmentation, exhaustive politics. There's no not celebration. We are celebrating, only start voting, promotes criminality, negativity, black leaders, turn your theory pocket, you reproduce limited economy, otherwise we're not relying on recognition, not what do you want it. So yeah.
Alright, walk me through all the motivations in this one here.
Reading pessimism against the black debater, a risk that there's a no link on the critique, black console counterplans against black debaters.
Is the argument for like why we shouldn't read consult counterplans against black debaters just infinite regress?
Infinite regress is violent because we have to weigh between what specific groups of blackness is better when it comes to
Okay.
white accuracy. Flipping negative reading T, and the impact turns on T.
What was the first argument on the counterplan other than consult counterplans bad?
Number one, either black people would say, or either black women would say no to the affirmative and it can't solve case, or they would say yes, but there's no say yes evidence which proves that it
Okay.
can't resolve.
Was the only permutation do both?
Yeah.
you should extend that. You should vote black women for attempting to make the safe space here. A lot of the offense in the TFA was specific to how we allow for the space to be safer for black children, and the space we want to engage in it, and all of our offense was not specific to just, debate is a game, therefore you should read the plan out, but no, it's specific to ways in which black people are able to engage in them. 3 is you should not vote for immigrants against hate because you should extend the fact that black women are police in the debate space, and the fact that little things that they do are used to then weaponize against them, which responses go to the tape. You say reading past against blacks right here is bad, but we're not going to go for results linkage. You 2 0 impact I feel again, it is best for mediation of space and you do so. And 3 0 you're that's what you should affirm here. The risk that the link is true, meaning the link isn't true doesn't mean that you shouldn't vote against, rather you should just disregard the argument, go to the control counterclaim stuff. You say infinite regress, one point for the question again for regress. We're testing so only one specific racial identity group, which is black women and femmes, which means that there's also infinite regress is when we already identified who that's going to be. And 2 you say fine because the way between blackness, but this is inevitable for black men because the misogynist also perpetuated by black men, which is forces them to kind of engage in this argument, and first this kind of decides to how we're able to sustain ourselves. So the kind of proper. The Ash Inter of higher dining and conversation with black women as the when you see it's a 4 framing issue, the debate which is the one-year lecture West Institute, the one see Harvard argument, the card, the uniqueness in the black women in social spaces like debate. If we win this towards the entirety of the one you see because a trope and structure misogyny always reproduces the same instructional bias towards black women, no matter what they say about black women and their care. Harvard, they're gonna label black women constitutes the communicate structure, maintaining relationship and stability of the family. Enslaved women were tasked with the work of child rearing and maintaining home, which translates to present day. There's a labor of care that is imposed on black women in the world. The preacher takes all the credit for uplifting the black community, while the preacher's wife takes care of the kids, keeps the house clean, puts on a pretty face for the congregation. All these are examples how to black women and this entrepreneurs kind of perpetrated through even the police theology act means that in the entirety of the Ashtranism black community will require the labor of black femmes with the unthought basis of it. You should think very hard about the state exchange we ask for. Who do you cry to? They say we go alone in the room. Proves the fact that they ignore the ways in which black men oftentimes also turn to black women, the ways in which the black community turns towards black mamas. Proves that they will never leave a thought that black women ignore the labor that they do for them because they don't even account for it as labor. This is all physically true in context of the one you see because they've overlooked the ways in which the black church contains liberatory potential but is not immune to reproducing the same patriarchal and heteronormative frameworks of white ones. Black men and queers are still subject to intimate violence in those spaces, but any attempt to address this will never be met with accusations of them being bad members of the community, which proves these double bias that these groups are placed in, and also proven by the fact that they say that we on the infinite reverse kind of combo, or on the control combo, they say we should we fragment the community, but we have to because of the fact that they put us in a position where we have to sustain ourselves. This manifests within debate because they can't go for arguments in the context of debate without answering a thesis lane. Think about how an NT of 2021, after white lost quarters, they turned to Shinara, the DOD and CCOS to comfort them, and black women like Bree Brinkley and Amber Kelsey are foundational to emotional support of black teams of black community. The act has afforded answer the question of who helps them be cared for in the face of the act. You should hear heavily and negative. Even if there's a risk that you think the act kind of replicates the same isolation of misogyny, or you don't think that's not intentional thing to do, we have evidence that explicitly says in context of communicating structure of intimacy to override good intentions. I wish to believe that black women in this question because it's literally impossible to know anyone else about the kind of burdens that are placed upon them. Go to the permutation debate here. It makes newer sense to the council of our argument consultation because the counterclaim makes the act secondary to the question of black women's needs and a distinct starting point that they never out. It says the voting issue because the act makes the act a moving target, which makes consultation impossible. And any risk of a leak argument or disab, and any risk that you kind of perpetrate the same ideas of misogyny or black men ignoring the needs of black women means that you vote for a negative here on face. And the permutation footnote, the question of black women's unique interests or fears because when we say that, oh, I'm tired, the act response is we're all tired, we're all black, which misses the point because black women uniquely are in a position where they're at the target that affects them and anti-blackness. And the permutation fails because any risk that they would have consulted all these black women already would have happened, but they didn't, which that time already passed. Go to the limelight. You say black women might say no, but if they say this is good, they should say no. If they say that the app is bad for them, that is a good thing. It hardens this will be allowed for black women to have that choice because oftentimes these choices are made for them. This able to say yes, evidence because they don't have to say yes, they're able to tweak the method in order to allow themselves to thrive another day. They say you don't know how many are needed, but it's not a question of how many needed. It's a methods debate. It's a question of whether you should consult black women as a whole, whether black women should be asking their input of the app before the rounds of rounds. You say you consult my mother, which is again one black woman. That doesn't speak for all black women ever. And we look towards the performance of the one you see when they say black women usually go to their own roots instead of turning black women, which is what actually usually happens. The process of the performance of the one you see also impacts their own performativity argument because it is already sutured in this misogyny war, and you should act so why one black woman should speak for everyone. And you say we can people cry external to black women, but again this is the process of the one you see. Obviously you as Zion can personally do that, but it's a question of how you allow the black women to engage in the one you see and how you make it more accessible. You already answered the permutation, which is the only offense here, even if you believe that there's a possibility that the permutation is true, kick the counterclaim as a counterclaim and violate as a case for an argument. If you feel we're losing the permutation, proves that misogyny or will be from saving the one you see, go to facts on case. We're going to send this argument. They say that black people can endure in a capitalist society, but they have totally misunderstood this argument. It's not that, yes, we agree that black black people cannot exist in a capitalist society, but rather they're a question of attempting for communities to focus on each other and special care are these kind of anti-black structures that will always sustain themselves. For example, not all communities are able to help support each other. When a black woman turns to a black man and says, I can't help you right now because I am too tired to do it for myself, proves that these kind of communities are unable to help each other and then stop relying on these actual structures to change themselves. Proves that we kind of get in this idea of complacency, and black people are unable to, black people are seen as non-resilient people that are unable to kind of change these structures. And the second argument we're going to go here on cases permutation, we should hold the line here insofar as the debate space isn't changed for black women and black men, specifically in these cases, and they're unable to kind of change the structural anti-blackness, and even if the act is complicit in the same levels of misogyny or in the same levels of anti-blackness that perpetrates in the debate space, means infinite reason for you to vote on the counterclaims, so at least we mitigate some of the offense and some of the arguments concerning the reasons misogyny or perpetrating itself in the debate space. Again, the permutation debate is also very specific here because they're unable to kind of stop the things like black churches being burned down, etc. But even in the face of this, the people that the community turn to when this stuff happens is black women, which proves that the counterclaim is the best way to kind of view and frame this theory of black theology, understanding the way this happens. Look, we're winning a counterclaim that impact turns the act, and if you believe we're not bringing permutation, they've heavily misunderstood the argument evidence and heavily misunderstood it. They've also not done a good enough job on the facts evidence, which functions as an impact turn. We have two pieces of offense to evaluate here, and the counterclaim also solves the act. So, you have plenty of places to write that about.
Or this case we counterclaim. You are not ready? Rule about the North Black here, to not recover that framing question means you filter off into develop by prioritizing key news, communication methods, for black people would allow niggas to feel and be heard on when our bodies feel back to the positivity of Afro depression, undergirds black interiority, make black folks unable to feel themselves and niggas around black communities are prone to perpetual, prepare black girls to the white world to impact one with the house session, we battle away our emotion, we create internalizing blacks, for example, not saving slavery, a choice to community fragmentation, our communities divided, label as black men as toxic, masculine, black women as aggressive, i.e. brown, and their boyfriend, being here as criminalizes, which solves their offense about white black men and women are labeled as the way that they are to be exhausted, black people are emotionally exhausted from battle fatigue, which shows that we are fight or die in terms of offense, stage, we're going to solve the specificity of the affirmative black liberation is the intersection of spiritual affirmation, race and is best care for black for community building, hope, liberation, and epistemology of love and non-violence, presumption arguments. Though I have one frame, which means that you should filter your ballot through what is kind of the best for black here. You could see the re-break later one in this end because it shows that we have in and out of bounds spill over the ballot. The key to challenge the structure of the debate and the model that are practiced just by solves. All the presumption arguments because it has a spill over to how the debaters norms develop in relation to the blacks to the ballot is the motivator to care about and discuss the affirmative. Otherwise, we never care about also presumption, not unique. So obviously, voting negative when also the totality of the counterfeit impacts or the permanent impacts. The occasion of the one the facts are not gone for. You responded to my arguments that I extend a warrant from the facts and evidence. I'll respond to your arguments right now. Alternative is that we never attempt to engage in community, which prevents our ability to engage in really calculated if we're not able to have community in the first place. Also, the affirmative does not say that we have to help each other, but rather just have the ability to help ourselves in the first place, which shows why we are seeking question to the impact of that impact out the impact of evidence enough to hold the line on voting in that case. That's the case in the California proper case away from the cake accessibility way. So the niggas need black kids to be able to sustain themselves and engage in consultation with black women. Permutation do both solve the offense. Who knows is unclear on what is enough to consult black women. Permutation solve because we either one or two are enough. So we are the California or we are not, but it's not competitive. So no reason that we cannot endorse the affirmative. If it is true that black expression relies on black women, the Africans inherently consulting black women because it is black men expression. It solves your kind of accessibility to set from the case thing because we we the greatest things in a form of expression that does not deny the fact that I literally consulted more black women. I said that you and myself turned your argument. Also, you and my mom turned your argument. Also proved that the permutation is true because either one is not enough or two is not enough. It's just, you never know what is enough or what is looking like the console turn to solve. That's because you don't know how to engage in it. The limelight proper case solves the black women labor argument because we did not kind of put the because we didn't black women won't have to put the burden on black women if they have a way to care for themselves in first place. To solve the kind of argument, not ignoring that black women care for us, but the fact that I know that myself I've cried by myself more than I've cried with my mother. Shows how we're not intrinsically like crying is not intrinsically to black women. There are arguments that they need to win. There's no reason why the act of consultation, the dialogue is actually key to solve the affirmative or solve their own impact. So our best is not need this. So that if you vote for it as the case turn after the contemplate, it's still a non-need this because there's no reason why the act of consultation and dialogue is key to solve their impacts or my impacts. The conflict cannot solve case. Yes, it needs to yes. Because the truth does not explain enough on why the act of consultation is key to solve their arguments. So shows that there's no actual solvency in the debate. The labor arguments assume that black men will have to rely on black women labor, but the case solves because black men want to rely on them but ourselves. Voting negative will not solve their own impacts because there's no reason why consultation will just stop the role that black women have or will stop the role that black men have of having to rely on women. If you don't vote affirmative, then their conflict impacts are reproduced. So the permutation solves. Good debate.